Raymond, you teach in Sacramento. Raymond has done these beautiful icons, even this one that you were venerating in church, which I have to say, I came in and I thought, oh my gosh, they are so spoiled. They get, beautiful iconography. Another good example of this, certainly doesn't show the historical Jesus. I promise you, at no moment in history did Jesus appear like this, but this tells us everything about who Jesus is, who his mother is, who we are with them. This is the image that's oftentimes in the back of our churches in what's called the apse, where Mary, or the orans, Mary's hands are outstretched. It's probably the oldest image, at least in the catacombs, that was used to indicate church meets here. But Raymond, before you get carried away, do you teach class in Sacramento at your home or at a particular?
Yeah, just in my home. I just meet with my students 1 night a week, 2 hours.
1 night a week, and 2 hours, or as long as the children allow or permit you. But I'm going to take his class too, because I want to become like him when I grow up. Doesn't matter. He could be. He's probably just a few years older than I am. Doesn't matter. Were there other questions? I know it's probably warm in here, unless it's just because I'm standing and I'm doing all the talking. It must be cooler down there. You all look very relaxed. Yes, ma'am.
The icon that is referred to as the Holy Icon.
I'm sorry.
Is that different from the icon you were speaking of?
No, that's the same. One of the common names for that icon not made with human hands is the holy napkin. I know that sounds like you're going to a really nice dinner party with the Queen, but the holy napkin it's just a reference to the cloth that Christ's face appeared upon.
It's also called the holy mandilion.
Mandilion is another reference to the napkin.
You said the Shroud Turin.
Well, that would actually, in some ways, yes. I mean, because they talk about reversal of light coming out of it. It's almost a negative in its presentation. That, though, would be more of a reference to something very historical, if, in fact, it is the shroud that Christ's body was wrapped in. Then it's a historical, besides being a relic, a holy relic, it's also a historical document.
One thing about the frame. You remember you teaching us about the frame should not be ostentatious because that would distract from what...
Thank you. Normally we don't put the icon in a frame. I mean, in this case, this icon is being protected from too many holy kisses, but just by having a glass cover on it. But we don't normally frame the icon. Now, granted, a lot of icons are prints, so to make them more respectfully presented, we might put them in a frame. There's nothing wrong with that. But a real icon, and a painted icon, because it's not this kind of a window, it's the opposite. It's a window where this reality is breaking forth into your world. We don't frame it. You don't have control over this breaking forth. You're just the receiver. Every time you walk past this icon in your home, Jesus and Mary are going to pop out and grab you. My younger brother, when he was building his home in Sacramento, put a big icon of Mother Mary holding Jesus, and he wanted her with a stern look because he said, that's how the kids get back to their bedrooms down that way. But I wanted her to come out and grab them every time they had driven him and his wife crazy. But, I gave her a nice, peaceful look I wanted them to know they were loved by their age. Uncles can do that. They don't have to live with the kids.
About the Russian iconography and Greek iconography, if there's any distinct difference there.
There are a lot of distinct differences in different cultures referencing icons. And I'm glad she was asking between Greek and Russian. There are stylistic differences. But that just leads me, we oftentimes don't realize that in the United States, in this country, prior to it being the United States, there's an old tradition of iconography. not Byzantine, not Greek or Slavic or Coptic or Ethiopian or Northern African. The Northern African iconography is probably older than much of the European iconography, but this is Spanish iconography, and it is iconography. This is no reference to somebody. This is San Juan Nepomuceno, and if I'm saying his name right, and if I'm not, forgive me, who is not being presented historically. This retablo tradition is all throughout Arizona, New Mexico. People on the East Coast are always horrified to find out that the oldest capital in the United States is not Washington, D.C., but Santa Fe, New Mexico. 400 years they've just celebrated. And if you go throughout that whole area, you'll encounter a very traditional form of Hispanic iconography. Even the statuary is much more like icons than it is like Western statuary. It was very clear that they were trying to communicate exactly what we communicate in Byzantine iconography. The light is not hitting this figure. In fact, I mean, the light is just evenly dispersed. There's never... some would consider it very crude work. I hate to tell you how, just like that lady got her probably an old icon for $7.50. You won't find it here in the city because most people know what icons are. This was found in a thrift store in Honolulu for 50 cents. The artist's name was on the back. I saw him in New Mexico at one of the art fairs in Santa Fe. A piece similar to this was selling for $800, and I told him, I got it for 50 cents! But it just shows you the beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and I was glad. I wasn't going to pay $800. I mean, I couldn't have paid $800, but I had 50 cents. 50 cents at a thrift store! So, any kids? Yes?
So this is in regard to the shape. Okay, you've been talking about like the shapes rectangular or square. Can an icon be any shape?
The icons can fit lots of different shapes. In older times, that was more in reference to what kind of wood people had available to them. For the most part, we only work with non-resinous woods like poplar or birch. Here you can actually use redwood. It's a non-resinous wood. Oaks, you can use oak, you can use hardwoods. It's just that if you're doing everything by hand, that's a little more tedious. So your any non-resinous wood is going to, a resinous wood is going to crack all apart when it dries, even if it's been properly cured. Eventually, over 500, 600, 1,000 years, it's going to crack apart. And even though I say to people that I'm teaching you a method that has a lot of longevity, and people will say, well, nothing in this world lasts forever. You're right. I mean, get a mirror. But the fact is that, oh, good, we have more people that are here right at the end. They will not be bored. It's still the icon, using these processes that will communicate longevity. It's an eternal world. So if I'm going to just use cheap stuff, even acrylic paints, I can only give you a 25-year guarantee, or what is referred to in American law when you go to the depots, or not, the hardware store, and it says lifetime guarantee. I think it's 25 to 30 years is a lifetime guarantee. That's all we can give you on acrylic paints. Now, it doesn't mean that they're not going to last for hundreds of years. It's just all we know. Whereas with wax and egg yolk tempera and cured wood, we can give you 1,000, 2,000, 3,000.
So your only concern then is the longevity and the preservation. There's no spiritual concern?
Well, because that speaks to eternity. If I'm creating something that's only going to last 25 years, it says, well, this material doesn't refer to longevity. I want even the material to speak to you or whoever is being viewed by this icon as saying, you know, it's true, everything is falling apart, including And I do think we should be very respectful of the universe and the earth and all that, but the earth is dying. It has to die. It's a material thing. Everything that is biologically disintegrates. The natural philosophers taught us that. This wood will disintegrate, even if it's thousands of years from now. But while we have it for prayer, it communicates eternity. If it's just, falling apart right after I've painted it for you, first of all, I'd feel bad.
But so still, I really want to understand, are you really saying that your major concern is preservation, as opposed to, I've heard criticisms that you're not using the egg, you're not using the water,
I see.
You're not using all the natural materials of all the symbology.
Well, see, this is a very important question, and I take
I
it.
really want to know, because I might need to go back to egg tempera.
Well, there are people that paint with acrylic paint, and again, I would used to say, oh gosh, how can you paint with plastics? It doesn't have the longevity, but it may very well, for some people, they're not going to be able to have access to egg tempera or even to real wood. And if you're even painting, just getting something from the craft store and painting, and it's helping you to pray. And I've had people in my life and in my workshops that paint beautiful, holy icons with acrylic on clay board, on stuff that they bought at the craft store. I don't want to stop them. If that's what's most available to them and what's going to keep them praying and moving on, who am I to stop them? I really don't want to stop them.
Well, Father Brendan felt like it made icon painting more democratic. So more people can access this.
I'm going to see him in a couple of weeks.
He said, I've made it easier. He said, I made it a lot easier for him.
He has. And you know what? I've inherited, he stopped teaching all over Korea. So I've inherited all of his classes. And all of his students come after me.
So you're my
Do you
teacher
have to
now.
leave us? Thank you for coming if you're all leaving. Shock, no, you're coming. Okay, well, go potty and then come back. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to mention that also mosaic is a traditional form, and we have some exquisite mosaics locally here.
Thank
In two
you.
of our Greek churches.
Thank you. Mosaics, probably even more so, I'm sorry to say, than egg tempera or wax, speaks to longevity.
And also, we were told in Father Brendan's class, there's another miraculous story to the icon not made by hand. Not only was it Christ pressing it to create it, but that it was hidden in a wall to preserve it from the Islamic invasion.
Mm-hmm.
And when they opened up the wall, then it had transferred an additional face onto the ceramic wall itself. So there are both of those images now are not made by hand.
That's right. There are wonderful, miraculous stories attached to almost all of the icons. Many of the icons of the Mother of God are said to have been painted by St. Luke. Obviously, he probably didn't do all of them, but even that, the prototype or reference, most importantly, in the face not made with human hands, is the miracle that God has a face. That the invisible God has a name. The unnameable God can be comprehensible. And the same with the Mother of God icon, that God becomes a baby and that somebody could have had them sit down and paint them, obviously not with Byzantine clothing, but still, that it was possible is a reference to the truth that Luke was a physician and that Mary and Jesus were real people and they could be depicted in imagery.
Well, you mentioned the wonder-working qualities. We often have wonder-working icons visit the Holy Virgin Cathedral, and there are icons over at St. Tikhon's where St. John Maximovich lived, which when people moved, contemporary people came into that chapel, you couldn't really discern the picture, and the picture is now renewing itself so that it's clearer and clearer and clearer.
There are a lot of icons, just in case some of you didn't hear that, just icons that the material communicates miracle. And that might be even a reference, ma'am, to your question about acrylics. If there's a paper icon in Honolulu at the Little Russian church, and the caretaker of that church happens to be a student of mine, and they invited me, and it's just a paper print. And I think it's been brought here, it just
Yes.
oozes, I've held it in my hand, there is no explanation. It's a piece of paper, and you hold it up, and it just drips with oil constantly. I mean, and some people said, well, we could solve the oil crisis with, more holy icons, and it smells, and